You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. Now today I bring you something a little different. I sat down with Alexis Giostra. She calls herself a productivity alchemist. That's intriguing, isn't it? Her work covers productivity and efficiency, but also philosophy, spirituality, and quantum physics. You've heard of the law of attraction, but have you heard of the rest of the 7 hermetic principles of the universe? Alexis breaks it down for us. We as women are doing a lot, like everything for everybody, and sometimes it wears us out. What if we could take on less and accomplish more? Sounds tempting, doesn't it? This conversation delves a bit into the woo-woo of it all, which really is nothing unusual if you travel in creative circles in LA. I also want to introduce you to the new podcast I will be launching in June called Exit 38. Now, this show is completely different from the herstory of Hollywood. You could call it the odd couple of politics and culture. 2 very thoughtful and informed people from opposite sides of the political spectrum discuss the issues of the day with the intent to learn from each other and find some common ground. This is what I think the country is thirsting for, some rational conversation around some very emotional issues. Where does the sanity reside? I think it resides at Exit 38. So go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe now so you don't miss an episode, launching on June 1st. And stay tuned at the end of the show for the trailer of Exit 38. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbay, and now on Spotify and iHeartRadio and YouTube. Okay, here's my conversation with Alexis. Have a listen. I'm really excited to talk to you, actually, because I think what you do is going to be really relevant for me personally. So hopefully everyone else will get something out of it, too. So explain to me what it is that you do.
Okay, so I am a productivity alchemist, is what I call myself. I know.
That's a fancy name.
Eyebrows get raised because it's not a term that you hear a lot, right?
Yeah, what does that mean?
So essentially for the last few years, I have been producing productivity content tools in the digital form online to help people work smarter, not harder. So yes. I actually got started with the planner community. If you're not familiar with planners, Filofaxes, there's all different, all that.
Everyone has a paper planner.
Yeah, it's like a thing.
It is a thing.
It is a thing on the internet that some people are like, what? Planners? People are really into them? Yeah, so when I say into them, it's like, I'm not going to use the cult word, but maybe it starts to feel that way a little bit. So this is a very enthusiastic community about planning and being organized.
You're saying they're not a cult. Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's not necessarily a cult of planners, but if someone said it, I wouldn't be surprised.
I have several people's planners, I will admit. But I wouldn't say I'm obsessed. I dabble in planners.
I dabble. I love that. Yeah. So essentially for the last few years, 4 years about, I have been creating digital products, courses, digital planner inserts. So in the planner community, there is a sect of people who like to make their own and selling printable planners like PDFs that you can print at home, cut, and put it inside of whatever binder system you have. So yours is not necessarily a binder system, but a Filofax would be like a sort of binder system sort of planner where you punch the holes and you put them in and you can kind of create your own little system. So this is kind of it is a niche within this world that of planners that is something that I've been serving for the last few years.
Now, I wish all of that could be on the computer.
And there are some that are like that, and I have thought about perhaps developing some digital ones, but the reason that I always stick with paper is because when it comes down to brass tacks about it, one of the reasons that paper planners really do very well is because they do give people a sense of more control. I think it's because of, studies have shown that when you write things down, the actual physical sensation of writing is very powerful for people, very cathartic. It also helps you to remember things a lot better. And actually, like they've shown in studies that if you feel incredibly overwhelmed, just making a to-do list, just writing it
every day
will release your stress to the equal amount of extent as if you had even completed all those items. So it doesn't even matter if you get them done. Just writing the plans down, the to-dos down, makes you feel stress-wise as though you have accomplished everything.
Because you don't have to hold it in your head.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Yeah, so I've been serving this community in this capacity for the last few years, and a major, demographic of this community is women. And specifically, we have women in, for me, 35 to 55.
Because we're doing the emotional work.
Yes. So, these are women who, some of them who have been drawn to me are drawn to me for, I think, my business and a little bit of my sort of philosophy on life that is very much into what people would consider the woo-woo. But I really don't like that word because I think it really, I don't know, kind of puts down these sort of spiritual practices and beliefs that many people, including myself, hold.
They're getting more and more mainstream.
Yes, they are. And I really think that is the future. And I feel like this is why now Productivity Alchemist is showing up.
Yes.
So I've been serving these women, and it's just a common thread that I've been seeing with students and clients and, people who are my customers is that women specifically seem to really struggle with expectations. I think we know this, right? Mm-hmm. No one's going to be shocked by that because of, the demands of modern society and, even to an extent, feminism and women's rights. Really, I think the conversation has really led us to feel like, okay, so we can be the mom and we have the career and we're also that community-centered focus for our families and people around us and our church groups and extracurricular
This is where
activities.
we made a mistake.
Yeah, so we started taking on too much and didn't put up boundaries or didn't feel like, we felt like because the world was our oyster, that we had to do everything. We had to do everything. And so...
Big mistake.
Yeah, big mistake. So you can imagine how people's productivity suffers. Specifically, for me, I see how many negative effects this has in terms of manifesting in terms of physical illnesses or women not taking care of themselves. So I have actually been someone who, for my entire life, I love productivity because I am someone who considers themselves to be naturally lazy. Now, one of my girlfriends who is also big into manifestation with me told me this morning I have to stop saying that about myself because I'm actually manifesting it more.
Yeah.
But I say it more as almost like a example that you may think because I study productivity that I am a naturally productive person, and as the opposite. I study productivity because when I was younger, I was a high achiever, but I was incredibly lazy. And productivity hacks were the way that I would manage my time and make, what I like to say is I want to be the person who's kind of like the chess grandmaster. If you're a grandmaster of chess and you're playing a novice, you should be able to beat them in just a few moves, like a handful of moves. That is what I want to be. I want to be the person who has the visual sight to everything in my life and what my actions are going to do and their results, to only have to make some strategic little moves and then get to the results that might take someone else a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of planning, a lot of maybe going down the wrong roads and, exploring. And I do think there's value in that, like exploring life, making wrong decisions. We would say wrong. I don't think there's ever really wrong decisions. You really are just always, I think, just cutting off options, right? Like, okay, this was not for me. I tried it. It was not for me. So this, this community that I've been serving, I see this need. And for me, as someone who's been very lazy, but I also have noticed that, and especially in the last year, I feel like I was very much guided to dive deep on certain philosophies of metaphysics, physical realities and quantum mechanics, which has actually always been a very big interest of mine. In fact, my blog is called strangecharm.com because charm and strange are a pair of quarks in quantum theory. And so it was interesting to people that wait, you started with that thinking I thought I was just being funny because I liked quantum, a little bit of a joke, right? But then now it's like,
so
actually,
there's something to it.
There is something to it. And we're not beginning to see, because the studies have been there for a very long time that show that our physical reality is more than what we are seeing. In fact, what we are seeing is a result of maybe what we want to see, what we're manifesting, and the energy that we're putting out. And so I've noticed that through my life, although I've been a very lazy person and yet a very successful person, it wasn't just my actions that brought me success. It was also my ability to project what it is that I wanted and allowing the universe to give me what it is that I wanted by literally having almost a ruthless sense of not believing in reality. So if anyone, they would say lived, whose head was in the clouds, I'm always projecting what it was that I want, and ultimately I would always get it. Things seem to be hand delivered to me sometimes, even though I'm not someone who places a lot of energy into my actions sometimes. So through this last year, I've been studying this very deeply. I think in a lot of ways, many people are familiar with these concepts in terms of The Secret and the law of attraction, which
I have Abraham Hicks on a loop.
Yes. So
yeah.
Did you know that the law of attraction and Abraham Hicks, those philosophies, I can't speak for Abraham himself, but themselves, but that law of attraction is just one part of one principle of the universe that actually belongs to a collection of principles called the 7 hermetic principles. So law of attraction is based on the idea that everything vibrates, which we know from quantum theory is that although, humans, when you look at us, we are a collection of densely packed cells. When you go deeper on the quantum level that we can't even actually see, we are actually, we theorize that these things are there. When you go down, deep down inside, what you have are these systems where you have like a nucleus, right, that has like protons and neutrons inside. And then we've got electrons spinning around in a very open space environment. So although we are a collection of packed cells, when you get really deep down inside, we are actually space, wide open space, very similar to the structures of our solar system. So it really, all of this sort of aligns in the sense that, as above, so below. We are actually, they say we are made of stardust because everything in the universe is made of the same particles. And inside of us, we have an entire universe inside of us as just as big as what we see out there. It's just from our perspective, things look a little bit different. So that we really are like one with the universe. And you're looking at me a little bit like...
Okay, here's why I'm looking at you like this, because I'm kind of smiling at you like, oh, thank God you have arrived on my couch right now. Because I am a woman who's trying to do too many things and working really, really hard. And I am constantly trying to figure out how to be more productive with less effort and create more space in my life. Like today, I did 3 or 4 interviews back to back to try to focus that energy doing that thing. And little by little, I'm trying to do that in my life because my to-do list is 10,000 things long and I don't have the bandwidth and I don't have the time. So I would love to hear some of your strategies.
Yeah. So this is actually something that is really interesting. So when because I'm talking mostly to women, it's actually very interesting that in these philosophies, these 7 hermetic principles, one of the philosophies, not just the principle of vibration, there's a principle of gender. Now, when I say that, I don't mean sexual gender or what body parts you have, but just that everything in the universe has a gender, and masculine or feminine. Everything that has energy, we'll say people have energy because we vibrate and we're like these little solar systems, right, that are clustered together. So everything has a gender, male or female. So in the male gender, the way that they act is through action, through execution. So we think that like men being the go-getters, that is how they put their energy. They're an energy of giving or sending out, and women are an energy of receiving. So women are the opposite of that. So actually, I just recently finished reading a book called The Field by Lynn McTaggart, which is part of like my research. I read all of these sort of metaphysical books. And she was talking about studies that were done on people trying to use the power of thought to affect things like a coin toss, heads or tails, right? So when you do toss a coin, more or less, the results are roughly 50-50. There can be some sort of outliers where there are like a little bump here that heads might be, spun more or tails might pop up more. But basically, there have been these experiments done where they made people, men and women, focus on achieving a certain result, for example, get more head results. So the thing that's actually interesting that I think actually pertains to this conversation and women and how we are actually perhaps not being as effective as we can when we're trying to push and execute, is that when men were actually focused very specifically and very strongly on trying to produce a heads result, they were actually able to produce a result that was 100 times outside of what the outliers would have been if it had been like a completely random thing. So their focus actually did give them their result on a very big way. So heads showed up more. It didn't mean that everything was heads, but heads showed up significantly more. Now, when women did it, when they focused their energy on I want heads, being very focused against what that goal was, they did affect the results in the exact same way, 100 to 1, to produce more tails. So they actually received the reverse of what they were looking for. However, when women were not as focused on the end goal and maybe perhaps set an intention that was, I want there to be more heads, and now they actually occupied the women with other things, then they got the result 100 to 1, the heads.
If they set the intention and then walked away, I'd like to receive more heads and then walked away?
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yes. So for me, this actually speaks beautifully to the idea of gender and how the masculine putting their attention and focus on something can move. Something can work for them. But for women,
it wears us out.
It does. It not only does it wears us out. There's energy, and we're actually going against perhaps the flow of our maybe natural vibration as women. And of course, there's a lot of different, things that we could, I know I have so many examples in my head. I'm like, I wonder if they tested this, or if I wonder if they tested that. Like, what was the definition of woman? Like, is it someone who was born a woman?
I know, it's like,
is it
tread lightly.
It is tread lightly. And I don't mean to stir a pot with that. I think it's an area where I would love to, sort of maybe be able to like tell them, hey, could you do a test like this? Where it's like, I've been theorizing that perhaps it could have something to do with our hormones and pheromones. So that perhaps maybe a woman who's gone through menopause fully, who is not producing the same amount of hormones that she was in maybe her like prime time of life.
Well, we might have some in our medicine cabinet.
Yeah.
Just saying.
That's true as well, because they do usually supplement. But if our bodies aren't producing the same things, that sort of energy, because our pheromones are the energy that attracts the men, right? Then, I've been thinking, I'm like, ooh, is that going to change the results that they would get? So, I mean, I want to dig more deep into what those exact results were that, Lynn McTaggart talked about in her book.
Interesting. I have a very specific question about this, because I have been listening to Abraham Hicks a lot, and a lot about the set your intention and then don't think about it. Walk away, allow it to happen. Don't work. And I'm thinking, yes, that is great. How is my to-do list going to get done? If I do, because legit, I need to edit my podcasts and publish them, and that's a thing that needs to happen that I need to do. I can't just, I'm going to manifest that and walk away. So I'm having trouble reconciling the leave it alone and walk away versus the you do have to do some tasks.
That's true. And like I said before, I want to be that chess grandmaster so that I am focusing on putting my effort into a few different actions that will give me the same result as someone who's perhaps doing an entire laundry list of items.
Okay.
So actually,
talk to me.
Now let's talk about then the masculine part of execution, because I do believe that when it comes to this idea of productivity, that even women, I don't think they should just be using that passiveness. I think that we have to balance the masculine and the feminine. But I do think that that example specifically with those heads and tails sorts of experiments that were done, it really shows that a lot of times women are pushing, wearing themselves out, and it's not perhaps the best use of their time and energy.
Right.
So
It's not.
But we do have to make actions. We can't just, I think, maybe...
Can't just sit around and think
can't
about
just
it.
sit about and think about it. That seems like a little bit
too magical thinking.
too magical. Exactly. So in terms of productivity, in my very basic studies of productivity, I started out... I read Getting Things Done by David Allen when I was in high school. I had a copy of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People on my Palm Pilot.
So this is an early passion
of mine.
You're like the Marie Kondo of tidying up to productivity.
So I really was that nerdy girl who really liked these ideas. And so back then, when I was growing up in the 90s, well, I guess that was maybe 2000s by the time I was in high school. But, back then, when we were talking about the subject of productivity, those books are, without a doubt, things you may have heard of, you may have read them, but they're also books that you've probably seen if you work at a normal, sort of like average company job. Your manager might have them on their bookshelf.
Of course.
Because these are business books, right? So the conversation around productivity has always been centered around this corporate structure, how we can maximize effectiveness in the workplace.
Move the big rocks, not the small rocks.
Like let's go get where's the low-hanging fruit, right?
Yes.
So like
let's find the blue ocean.
Absolutely. I worked in corporate America, Fortune 50 company for, over 5 years before I went full-time in my own business doing this sort of productivity work. So I'm very much aware of the corporate structures and how, productivity has always kind of been a word that's used about like output, input in terms of business.
Be more efficient.
Absolutely. And then outside of business as well, productivity is often talked about within personal development spheres, which again, not everybody is necessarily interested in that. But geez Louise, even if you're a woman that's not interested in productivity or doesn't work at a corporate job, don't you need to know something about relevant productivity?
You're juggling a life, and it's overwhelming.
Absolutely. And so what I found was that these, productivity strategies that I had been using and teaching to my audience, I at one point, especially early on, I really saw myself as someone who was perhaps taking these ideas that come from a very masculine, sort of white-collar working male sort of demographic and helping to translate that for women who might be stay-at-home moms, who might just have normal as in non-corporate jobs, right? Like, your average woman who is not perhaps involved in corporate sales results. There definitely are women that are doing that. So they probably already, are aware of this stuff in one way or another. But these women that were coming to me were, the average working American women.
Yeah.
So
going to a job, taking care of your kids,
exactly,
sorting it all out.
Dealing with PTA, helping out at your church, maybe taking care of an ailing parent, something like that. So I was seeing myself as someone translating David Allen's, perspective into a situation where we have women who are overwhelmed with expectation.
Yeah.
So now I really see, I've also been studying a lot of productivity in terms of, for me, how do I cut off? For me, the question of how we cut off, more tasks, right? So that you can get down to that minimum, few
What's
tasks
important.
that are, very strategic. For me, I like to follow the Pareto principle. It's also known as the 80-20 rule that is often talked about in many different contexts, especially in business. That was actually where I was first introduced to it. And it's the concept that 80% of your net result is yielded from only 20% of your actions. So in your example of, being someone who is like, I have a laundry list of things to do and they have to get done in order for me to accomplish things, I would challenge you really.
Do they really?
So, if you had 100 things on a to-do list, I could, talking to you, finding out like what it is that really is a priority and things like that and what has actually been effective for you. Because a lot of times we put things on our list that are expectation-based, right? That we think this is what's going to happen. We think this is what we need to be doing in order to make this happen, especially for someone like you who's in this creative space where you're creating content and you're trying to put it out into the world. And that's not something that's necessarily very formulaic. There's a lot of different strategies for how you could put content out into the world. You have a podcast. I have a YouTube channel, right? It's not always exactly the same. There are some guiding underlying principles that are the same, but not everything, the strategy doesn't have to be the same for me and you. So when you really look down at that list, I should be able to take off 80 things off of a 100 to-do list, and you should actually have a pretty solid result. Now,
I'll go get you my list.
Yeah, let's get your list, right?
Well, I do find if there's something on the list that I keep transferring to the next iteration of the list, at some point I'm like, well, forget it. It obviously wasn't that important.
Exactly. You only thought it was important. And that's actually a really good conversation to start about expectations, because a lot of times we think we need to do something or we put it on our list, it would be really great to do. And ultimately, if you're someone who's overwhelmed, if you're an overwhelmed woman who's got a job, kids, all these different responsibilities, I know for a fact you are not getting everything done. There are things every day that you're not getting done and that you're pushing. And that creates a situation where either you're going to eventually drop the thing, forget about it, and it didn't matter that it was on your list to begin with, or you're going to be someone who is chasing after fires, right? You're going to be running after fire after fire.
Or you're doing laundry in the middle of the night crying.
Exactly.
You're so tired.
Exactly. So for me, with the 80-20 rule and with lowering expectations and creating a sense of white space in your life by literally, number one, cutting out extra stuff, right? If you are that overwhelmed mom doing laundry and crying in the middle of the night, what are some things that you have said yes to in your life that whether or not you were interested in it, really are not essential for you right now? There is this conversation I love when people talk about, there being seasons of your life that you'll do this or that. And I have a lot of people, like I said, who are attracted to me on a business sense. And these are like busy working moms that have kids, a job, other things. And they say, I would also like to start a blog.
And I'd like to exercise.
Also, and it's like, okay.
There aren't that many hours in a day.
Correct. We need to prioritize.
Yeah.
What is the absolute minimum viable amount of effort you have to be putting in to just get yourself back to sanity, right? Get yourself back to self-care, right? Which is something that women are not doing.
Last on the list.
You're last on the list, and
So we get autoimmune disorders in our 40s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we think that that's any sort of, these sorts of, there's women's, issues have really started to rise? A lot of people, I was talking to someone recently that when we think of heart attack rates, we think of heart attacks being something that are a problem for men, but they are equally something that is also afflicting women. Men and women both get heart attacks equally.
They look different.
They do look different. That's right. And because men tend to have more of a catastrophic event where it's like they have a heart attack, they have to go to the hospital. It's more dramatic. For anyone who's been married to, a man, that's perhaps part of the masculine energy.
It's painful. It's big.
Yes.
It gets noticed by doctors.
Absolutely. And the way women's heart attacks tend to materialize is that they actually cause like long-term damage that actually really it's over periods of time that women are living with these problems and discomfort and pain. And a lot of times they're not treating it because it's not that big catastrophic event.
Right, because we have a lot of stamina for discomfort.
Yeah, we do. I mean, women, they say, have a 9 times higher pain tolerance than men do.
Yeah.
So why do you think we make the babies?
And once you've given birth, no other pain compares. Yeah. So it's fine.
I personally can't attest to that, but I believe all the women who tell me. So this is, really we need to start by cutting off obligations from our list. And I know that we like to be people pleasers and, it's hard for us to say no. We always like to say yes. We want to be very accommodating. And so, we have to start by looking at those obligations that we're saying yes to. That yes, I'm sure you would love to, be the social organizer of your church, but do you really have the time for it? Is it truly a priority, especially if you're not taking care of yourself first? Mm-hmm. So we need to first cut off the excess, right?
Because we're also having the message of this should be our year of yes, where we say yes to every opportunity and every invitation and yes to everything life is going to offer us. At the same time, we have to start saying no so that we don't overcommit ourselves.
No, absolutely.
So which is it, lady?
Well, first and foremost, you need to say yes to yourself, right? Yeah. So you need to say yes to yourself. As they say, you cannot serve from an empty bowl. Mm-hmm. And I love to use the analogy, on airplanes, they give you that safety demonstration that says, in the event of emergency, the oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. Secure your own mask before helping others. And this is important. Why? Because I don't care if you're a mother and you're sitting next to your little child and you think I need to put their mask on first. If you pass out because your mask isn't on, you now put your child in a situation. You're not helping anybody by not putting yourself first. So if you really want to be that people pleaser, I'm not telling you not to do it, right? But I'm telling you, you need to at least be taking care of yourself first, and you're going to be able to serve people to a greater extent, a higher capacity, right? So I'm not saying don't help people, right? I'm saying in your priorities, you need to be priority number one. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, you most likely will need to say no to things. And I know that's hard for us to do as women.
I think it's hard for us because we've been so conditioned to help everybody else. Our mothers didn't necessarily take care of themselves, and we wait around for someone to notice and take care of us. Yeah. And it's never going to happen.
And this is all expectations. And this is why I'm almost like one of the most perfect women to have this conversation with women, because I really have been someone who, let's say I'm just a strange egg from the beginning, I've always set a lot of boundaries against expectations. I am very stingy with my time, and I know that people will be like, ooh, how could you? But it's like I'm protecting my time. I never let other people's expectations affect me. I mean, I do to some extent, but like I'm very, very protective of my time. So I'm very much here to help you say, and be an example that it's okay for you to say no to people. And guess what? You can still be a successful person.
Yeah.
Because I'm very much, I would say, a successful person. And, I wasn't ostracized from the world, right? Saying no to volunteering for something is not going to cause you to be kicked out of your home. And you're not going to be like chased out with like, spears, or whatever, like the...
Yeah, they're not going to kick your kid out of the school if you're not running the auction.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I think that a lot of times women feel like they either need to keep up with the Joneses, or they feel like there's going to be negative consequences if they don't say yes.
They won't like me.
Yeah. Well, you know what? They'll like you more if you're able to go a little bit deeper because you've taken care of yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So again, this is where you want to be strategic with your time. So put yourself first is my big rule. You have to put yourself first. You have to cut off all of the extra things that you just are not really adding to your life. That's not really, something that serves you to the highest good of what your priorities really are. So then, after you have done that, you can go back to focused action, right? Choosing focused action. So again, that's where the Pareto principle would come in, that 80-20 rule, and really looking at what your expectations are versus reality. And
then you can make a decision to where you want to spend your time rather than reacting to everybody's demands on you.
Absolutely. And it's okay for you to like give yourself space and prioritize yourself. And then the actions you'll be able to take, you're going to be actually doing better at them most likely because you're carrying fewer things. You're carrying a lesser load. So I'll give you guys a really amazing example of this. As someone who is an entrepreneur, like does run their own business, for the first few years that I was running my business, I developed it intentionally to be a passive income business. This is why it is digital products. Now, that doesn't mean that I am not putting work into my day. Like, obviously, I have a YouTube channel that's pretty successful.
We're working here.
And all these other, and I'm doing work right now. But it means that I have a lot of control over that, and my content can be, like, bulked. So I was very intentional to make sure that I was creating this passive business, and then it doesn't mean that I'm not actually taking action, right? So I am doing things, but it means that I'm actually able to take advantage of productivity principles like bulking your work so that I'm being more effective and efficient. And, I was definitely someone who was very intentional about the way I was spending my time and what I was doing. However, last year happened to be a very transitional year for me. I ended up losing 100 pounds last year.
Wow.
And really changing my life. And in order to do this, to lose that massive amount of weight that I've been holding on to for a long time, I needed to do what?
Take care of yourself.
And put myself first, right?
How'd you do it?
Well, by taking a big step back from my business. And it didn't mean that I didn't do any business work, but I did significantly less work for my business. For example, I completely stopped blogging. I was someone who had been making writing 3 blog posts a month. And I tested it out, let's skip some and see what happens. Okay, the world didn't end.
Nothing happened.
Okay, nothing happened. My business isn't crashing down. A little bit longer. Okay, still good. And by the end of the year, I had not really blogged. And guess what? My business, although it dipped a little bit, still maintained a full-time income for me that was very acceptable for my lifestyle.
So your blogging wasn't driving your business.
No, it wasn't. See, and it was something that I maybe perhaps thought was driving my business.
Right.
And it was one of those things where I did start as a blogger and I do love writing and blogging. But in that space of that year where I had to put myself first in a very big way, it was not, it was just not the effective thing that I needed to do. Making my videos, on the other hand, that was a little bit more effective for me. Like my videos do tend to be more of a driver. So I just put my energy in creating some of those, still not at the same level I had been, in previous years. But, once you kind of test out that, test the waters and you say, oh, I thought this was important and it really wasn't.
Yeah, because you set the expectations. Like I'm very conscious of, I publish every Tuesday morning come hell or high water.
Yeah.
And if I have more, I'll do one on a Thursday, thinking I can't possibly miss one.
Yeah.
Until I go on vacation, and I do, and the world doesn't end.
See, for me, I wouldn't do the extra. I would hold it. Like that second a week.
Yeah.
So my schedule was, 1 video a week, 3 blog posts, Instagram when you feel like it.
Yeah.
Answer emails. Usually
On a
every day.
Tuesday.
No, it was really, no, it was before last year, it was every day. But then it became maybe every other day. I actually put an autoresponder on my work email that said it may take me 48 working hours to get back to you. So if they emailed me on a Saturday, exactly, I set expectations. If they emailed me on a Saturday, I could take until Tuesday to email you back.
Yeah.
Right? Because that was a
weekend. If your hair's
weekend.
on fire, you can text me.
Yeah. So essentially, I know it seems like it's the end of the world to have to set expectations or to cut things out that seem like they're very important, or, sometimes we see oh, this person does this in their business, or this person does this in their life, and my neighbor across the street goes to the gym every morning, at 5 a.m. and she's got a great body and a great family, and therefore if I go to the gym every morning at 5 a.m., I'm going to have those results too, right?
Good for her.
Yeah.
Good for her.
But it's really about where you're going to be managing your own energy and what is really important to you. So it really comes down to setting expectations, cutting out the excess, and getting focused on yourself and getting focused on just the things that really matter. We can't be juggling a million priorities anymore.
Okay, so give us some nuts and bolts. What are the first things, let's take me as an example.
Okay.
What, if we were working together, what would the first things you would look at, or that we would start talking about? Do you talk about blocking time, or how
Well, first I would ask you, I'd want to know all of your responsibilities, all of your priorities, what all of your work looks like. Mm-hmm. And then I would want to know how effective you feel like you are, how overwhelmed you are. I'm assuming if you're coming to someone about productivity, you're feeling overwhelmed and you are not getting things done and you may be putting out fires.
You barely have time to have that appointment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say I would look at what your responsibilities are and how you feel you are, doing, holding things together, and where you feel like you have blocks that need to be overcome. So I work with women a lot who will come to me and say, I think that this is a block for me, right? I think that I just need to know I think I need to learn how to bulk my work more. So if I bulk my work, I'll save more time, right? Mm-hmm. But really, she's got a ton of expectations and a ton of responsibilities. And I'm like, it doesn't matter how many things that you bulk. There's really only 24 hours in a day.
It's too much.
And it does get to be too much. And although I say, work smarter, not harder, to me, that's not about let's fit more in a week's worth of work in one day.
Let's just automate everything.
Let's automate everything. I mean, it's just not realistic for most people. And so it really then becomes you tell me what your priorities are in your life. And I will limit those to 5. And I'm very vicious about limiting it to 5.
Hardcore.
So, yeah, hardcore. So, number 1 is yourself, always. Always automatically number 1 is your priority you. And then you tell me what the rest of your priorities are. Are you a mom, right? So maybe your children are next, and maybe you're married, and therefore your spouse is next. And then maybe you have a business, like a side business that you want to do. That might be next. But these are priorities where you are actually expected to show up, and you are expected, reasonably to be producing things, or you have goals set against these areas of your life. And, I really ask my clients to review those priorities. Sometimes people put things on that list that are very big, and I ask them what the ends are, what they're trying to achieve. Because a lot of times people, are looking for a certain result, and they think they need to do X, Y, or Z to get there.
Sometimes I think the doing is the result. You don't even know what the result is. You just think that it's something you need to do.
Yeah. And a lot of times I work with women who struggle with, they feel like the issue for their productivity, it's all about these problems that they have, and they're always trying to solve problems. And I try to teach that actually the problem isn't the problem. Everyone has problems in their life, right? And these things pop up. And yes, they can, stop you in your tracks where you are. But instead of working to fix the puzzle, right? You have to put together a jigsaw puzzle before you pass to the next section, right?
Yeah.
Is there a way we can just circumvent that? Right? Is there a way we can...
Leave that pile of mess.
Why? Exactly. Is this something... Now, there is a question of whether or not it is your mess to fix. Is it something that you need to do? But focusing on solving problems, which is what women like to do, right? Yeah. How to fix this, how to fix that, right? That takes up, again, 99 problems, right?
Well, it's comforting, and then you get to cross it off your list.
Yeah.
We like to cross it off the list.
But it's also a waste of time. Because problems always arise. So I would rather you find a new strategy to just get you directly to your result.
Yes. Okay, now, I think right now we're talking to a lot of women who are either working at big studio jobs where they have a lot of responsibility and managing their home and their family. And we're talking to a lot of female entrepreneurs or independent filmmakers who are creating their own content and doing, what you do with the YouTube or things like that. Do you approach those two type of situations differently, or is it all kind of the same?
No, I really don't. I don't personally approach different situations differently. The way I look at it is we are all humans, right? We all have 24 hours in a day, and whatever those responsibilities are, if it is a husband and kids, a job, a church, an ailing parent, whatever those things are, they are all just priorities, responsibilities, right? Taking care of an ailing parent, taking care of a child, these are both uses of your energy, right? So it doesn't matter that, what your exact situation is, because these are just responsibilities and things that you've added to your life or chosen in your life that you are looking to handle, right? So everyone, as far as I'm concerned, is equal. It is a question of getting you in tune with what the result is that you want to achieve. And a lot of times people don't know what the result is that they want to achieve. And that's why they keep piling things on based on expectations.
So I'll find it.
Exactly. Or it's this is something that someone else has done to be successful. And I know I want to be successful, but I don't exactly know what I want to be successful for. So it's I will just start doing this. That's why I think a lot of people come to me and they're like, I want to be a blogger like you. What was the ends that you want to achieve with your blog?
You're like, P.S. I'm not blogging anymore.
Yeah. It's still there. It gets updated sometimes. But, it was the bread and butter that started me. And so a lot of people are like, how do I do this? Or how do I start a YouTube channel? Or Alexis, how do I get to, a following of your size on Instagram? What are you doing it for?
Yeah.
If you can't really answer that, I think we need to be reevaluating why it's a priority, right? Because I don't think
What are you doing?
I don't like to have anything on that priorities list that does not have a clear-cut explanation for why it's there. Number one is you, because if something happens to you, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
Number two, if you're a working mom, or if you're a mom, or if you are maybe you have a career, right? And you don't have any children, you're not married, right? Whatever that number, it doesn't matter what the number two is. Why are you at that job? What is your purpose for that job? Maybe someone like that. I work with a lot of women who, they want to start a business on the side. Maybe they don't have a family, right? They want something else that's going to be bringing them joy. And I challenge them to say, why? Tell me what it is that you want. What is the goal that you want to achieve with that?
Yeah. What if you just liked your job better?
Well, if you like your job better, then...
No, I'm saying if you feel you need to start a side business, maybe you just need to have a different job.
Well, that's true as well. That's a whole conversation of, people sometimes I think that, people are like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be more creative. And my job doesn't do that. And I'm like, well, does it really not do that? Or can you find a job that does that? Right. And it creates the security for you so you don't have to go around. Honestly, when you do start something like a business or creative projects, it is a lot.
It is on the side to begin with.
It's on the side to begin with, and it is a lot of figuring it out because, like I said earlier, there is no one answer. There is no one roadmap to entrepreneurship or being a creative.
Days.
I mean, there really isn't even in success in general if you actually really look at it. When I graduated college, it didn't matter that I had a great GPA and all those things. The economy was burning down around me, right? Mm-hmm. So I had to take what it was that I could get, right? So, even going to college doesn't really guarantee you anything, right? So it's really about being very clear on what you want to achieve at your ends and then making sure your actions are in alignment with that, with those goals.
Now, I want to hear more about, you're saying the law of attraction is but one principle. What are some other ones?
Well, the first principle is the principle of mentalism, that the universe is mental, right? So it's all in your head.
Tell me more. I used to say this at work, and it didn't make me terribly popular, but we'd be in meetings and all upset about something, and I would say to people, you know what? We're making it all up. Like, it's all important because we've all agreed that it's important, but none of this matters and none of it is real. Like, we're all here just to work out our stuff.
Absolutely. Okay.
So let's try to be kind and help each other.
Absolutely. And think about expectations, right? They're all in your head. Mm-hmm. And the stress that you're feeling because of those expectations is all in your head. So kind of keeping in mind that although we live in a three-dimensional reality that feels very physical, everything about your perception of this world on the quantum level, and this is why a lot of these sorts of quantum theory and things really back a lot of these ideas up, it really is all in your head. Your brain is the mechanism that is interpreting what it is that are the signals that are coming through your eyes and the signals that are coming through your body and what you see and what you smell and what you hear and what you feel, right? It is all controlled in your mind.
And sometimes we do that in groups. Like, we'll as a team all decide that this is what the reality is and get all worked up about it.
No, absolutely. I mean, and that's why, like I said, I was someone who liked to create their own reality. Mm-hmm. And I really rejected expectations because it was like, well, that's your reality, that this is what I have to do. I think I see another way that's right for me. So, I was creating in my mind, didn't really know that, like manifesting where I am now. I was creating a world that was working for me, right? That was centered around me. You are the center of your universe. Your mind is the center of your universe. So that's just principle number one.
Okay. What's number two?
Number two is the principle of correspondence, and that is the principle of as above, so below, which we did already talk about, right? The idea that the biggest structures and the biggest ideas mimic exactly down to the smallest. So I think, and this is something funny, that when I first learned in chemistry that our, those very smallest pieces were made of that nucleus, that I'm like, oh, that's like the sun in the center. And then we've got these electrons in rings around, because the electrons, travel around in rings like our solar system. I'm like, that's not a coincidence there. That what is above us in the sky, that we are a small part of that microcosm, looks like that. And then our smallest parts also look like that.
And then what if we're inside some other giant being?
I've absolutely thought about that. I mean, in my mind, it's all part of the infiniteness of the universe, right? Because again, if the universe is mental and your mind, like nothing's limited really in your mind, right? It's like you have an unlimited source of creativity, ideas, and things like that. Like really, it's a limitless resource what people could be imagining. Especially, I'm talking to someone who works in the film industry, right? You guys can create wonderful pieces of creation, and you're talking to
Have
women
you seen
who
the
are,
Wrinkle in Time trailer?
Yes, well, that's a good one too. Like that really is like a story like that is very much kind of integrated with some of these philosophies. Yeah. So that is the principle of correspondence. So everything, we are in this infinite, right? We are one drop of a larger ocean, and we are an entire ocean in one drop. And that is the balance of the world in which we are part of an infinite reality that we experience.
So at the same time, it's like, calm down, you're not that important, and oh my God, you're important.
Yes. It's like the dichotomy of life, right? Yeah. So you are one in a billion, 6 billion.
Speck.
You're a speck, and yet you are an entire universe inside of you.
Yeah, mind blown. Okay.
Yeah. So that is the next principle. Then the principle of vibration. We've already talked about that everything vibrates, and that's what the law of attraction comes from, and just principles of like attracting like, and energy, and the flow of energy, and how, you want to raise your vibration to be a more high vibe person, and that you'll find more success in your life because you'll be attracting more high vibe. But if you're someone who's low vibe and like depressed, sad, maybe a negative Nancy, you're going to be attracting more of that. And of course, you're going to be getting negative results in your life because you're low vibe, right? So that's the basic principle of vibration. It also encompasses law of attraction.
Way back when I was in acting school and reading, Stanislavski had a quote of like attracts like. So all you have to do is be exactly who you are, and that will automatically attract the people that you need to have with you. That's Stanislavski.
Yeah.
People get it.
I mean, and this is not even just we're talking about, this is ancient wisdom, right?
Right.
So this is like thousands of years old culture, societies were affected by these ideas that we're talking about right now.
And then every generation is saying it in a different way.
Absolutely. And every religion says it in a different way, or many of the religions, I believe, say it in a different way as well. So that's the principle of vibration. So that was number 3. Number 4 is the principle of polarity, that everything has two extremes, the polarity of the world, and that,
equal and opposite reaction?
That is a different one.
Okay.
I think that belongs to rhythm.
Okay.
Rhythm is equal and opposite reaction. So polarity is, so let's say you're someone and you're sitting there and you're like, I'm really stressed out. Well, stress belongs on a meter, we'll say like on a string, it's changed to being really zen and really relaxed, right? Because the opposite of stress is relaxation. So it is possible for you to change your vibration, right? From stress, which is a low vibe energy, to a high vibrate energy. It's not like it's being stressed is one thing of itself. It is a pole, right? It is like hot and cold. That is what hot would maybe the stress is hot, and then the non-stress is cold, but
it's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum, exactly. It is a spectrum. So that if you change your mindset and change what you're focusing on, you can move yourself. Just because you're stuck in like a rut and you're stuck feeling like sad or lonely or depressed, you can pull yourself to another part of that spectrum that is more positive, or where you prefer to be.
None of it's permanent.
No, nothing is permanent, no. And that really does kind of go into the law of rhythm, right? Which that is like the pendulum swing, right? That everything has an equal and opposite reaction. Because when you are in your life, and let's say your pendulum is swinging to one side where you are in a very low period, you are ultimately, that's going to be able to propel you into a positive period, right? So it is really helping. It's very important for you to get control of your mind so that you don't have to be doing this sort of very big pendulum swing, but it is there, this rhythm of the world, right? We all go through these sorts of cycles where it's like there's times where we're happy, seasons where we're happy, seasons where we're sad, and that is a basic principle of the world, this idea of rhythm, the rhythm of life. Then we go into cause and effect, right? So that everything has a cause and everything causes an effect, right? And even if you don't see what the cause is of something, something caused it. It wasn't magic, right? Everything is like a domino effect. And there is, if you were infinite as God, right, we'd say, or the universe, you would be able to trace all those little pieces, right? So there is this big puzzle or this big domino, that's effect that's happening.
So I think there are times in your life that you can see it. I think there are moments you get to in life where you look back and you think, oh, it all makes sense now.
It's funny.
All the past led here.
I will tell you a really kind of funny story is because I'm working with Alexia on the documentary. And when I met her at a retreat of our mutual friend and business mentor, Anne Samoylov. And I, on a whim, I'll start from the beginning. In October, I decided I wanted to step out in a big way in 2018 and be a thought leader in this area, because I felt like, I'd learned so much and people needed to know it. As you're saying, like, people need to know this, right?
I'm so glad you arrived.
So I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, and we were having a conversation about all this stuff and very much in alignment about the way we saw this in our own lives. And she is a young female entrepreneur as well. So she really, really got it with me. And I actually said to her, she actually said to me, it was like, Alexis, why don't you speak more? And I said, actually, since you said it, I'm just going to say it out loud. I think that's going to be my goal for 2018. I think that's the way I'm going to be stepping out in a big way and being a thought leader, is maybe doing more live things, more in-person things. So funnily enough, the day that I did that, later that day, it was like 5:30 at night and she had left. And I got an email from a major company that, what the company's name, you know what it is, I'm not going to say it, but it's a very major company. And they asked me if I would do a live workshop, if I was available for things like that. And I was like, that company asked me to do a live workshop, and like I'd be flown out to their headquarters to do it. And I just today said out loud.
That was very fast manifesting.
I happen to be a pro at this. So I may not be able to stop the cat from entering my sphere of influence here, but I can call like these opportunities to me. Now, that part of the story doesn't really matter, whether or not that's like, we're still working all the details out of whether or not I'm doing that. But that was an instant manifestation, right? For me, it was a sign.
And a little wink from God.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was a sign for me. Yeah. This is, you are on the right path. You're right. Keep going with this.
Yeah.
Now, here's the idea of not really having to act very much, the passive nature of I've set the intention, but I actually haven't taken any action yet. Mm-hmm. That was October. And then I was talking to my friend Anne, where I met Alexi at her retreat, and she was talking to me about planning this retreat, and I was talking to her about this offer that I'd gotten and, that story about, isn't that so funny that happened? And she said, well, why don't you come do a live event at this workshop? And I'm like, okay, sign, yes. Next sign, okay? So we go from October to December. Alexis has actually taken no action other than setting the intention. And then an offer is brought to her very seamlessly. On that call with her, booked the flight over here. I think she had a little bit of whiplash, like, whoa, that happened quick. I was like, that was a quick yes. So then fast forward to January, I go to the event and I meet Alexia. And there is this moment while I'm sitting there, and we were talking about the cause and effect and like being able to see it, like kind of seeing, oh, there's a future possibility in the past and everything led into this culmination, right?
Yeah.
I was sitting down and, by chance, we would say, Alexia was late to the event. She was like the last one to come in, and there was one seat next to me left. So she was forced to sit next to me. Alexia was sitting next to Alexis. Perhaps coincidence, perhaps not. I don't believe in coincidence.
Yeah. And just so people know, this is Alexia Anastasio, who I interviewed on a prior podcast.
She is an independent female filmmaker. So, and she is going to be, she has me as the subject of her next documentary about everything we're talking about today, about me being an alchemist. So there was a moment where, sitting next to Alexia, Anne was breaking us into groups, like pairing off with people. And I was kind of situated at a corner, and there was an odd number. So there was going to have to be one person who would be like in a 3 group. And she's like, well, you could do, you can go to that group or you can go to that group. And I sat there, and there was a left option. I could go to these people, or there was a right option. I could go to Alexia. And then Anne just goes, yeah, just go with Alexia. So I'm like, now I look back and I'm like,
of course you did.
I see that sort of like in slow motion, like with like Olympic music playing, like dun, 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 dun. Like, is she going to make the right choice? Right? And
here's an opportunity.
And then Anne, I was like, I was literally stumped. Like, I had to make a choice between 2 groups, Yeah. And Anne was like, no, just go to that one. And because of that, the activity we were doing was, we were supposed to write down a question that we wanted answered during the course of the retreat. And we were sharing it with our group in order to, see if we could brainstorm ideas, kind of get takes on it. And my question was, how do I step out as the thought leader? Like, what is that going to look like for me this year? And at that time, we didn't have an answer. But by the end of the weekend, after connecting with Alexia, she came to me and said, I'd like to do a documentary on you. Do you think that'd be something you'd be doing? That could maybe lead to like thought leadership.
That might help.
That might help, right? So that is like how I even got here to your couch, right? Because again, Alexia put this together. She was just like, be at Julie's house at 3 p.m. Here's the address. So it's really, things have been just brought to me.
Yeah.
So this is where that concept of alchemy actually comes in, that we actually spent a little bit of time, we were really talking about really the science behind it. And I feel like I didn't even get to the basic principle, which was that I call myself an alchemist because I'm preoccupied with the transmutation of energy into matter. That's what I was doing when I was helping people with their productivity and things like that, is helping to bring things from the 5D, 5th dimension, spiritual plane where ideas live, into the 3rd dimension, our 3D reality that's this physical realities, right? So if you're someone who's trying to bring a business into an existence, that's something that's going 5D to 3D for you, right? You want to make it a reality in your life. That's what I was teaching people with this sort of like project planning, productivity, very, very David Allen sorts of theories that I was translating for women. And then I sort of realized that, like, especially over the last year, really digging deep into these like principles of the universe that really scope, it's not just coming from science, and science is backing it, and then there's world religions that back it, and ancient philosophy that backs it. I really began to see that there is, for me, a one-to-one almost like process where there is the masculine side of productivity, which is the active side, where, we're talking about setting a goal, breaking it down into a project plan, actually taking the actions to get it done, and then you've brought your thing into reality. And then there is this passive way to actually bring things from the 5D to the 3D, which revolves around the concepts of like law of attraction and the hermetic principles that we talked about, the receiving, where we are setting the intention, we are visualizing what it is going to be looking like. We keep our frequency of our vibration up, and then it is delivered to us. So there's this like one-to-one parallel correlation for me that this masculine and this feminine. And, like we talked about the heads or tails earlier, women, we need to try to find some ways to integrate this more passive receiving energy into our life, not thinking like we have to be responsible for everything, right? We have to embody that energy. Yeah, we have to control it, or control our minds, because everything is mental. It's all up there. We already said that. First principle, everything's mental.
But we feel like we have to control all the tasks.
Yeah, no, you don't. No, because remember, cause and effect. You don't even see most of the cause and effect that even leads you to things.
Right.
So that's it. That's why I'm an alchemist. I know you're thinking like you think alchemist, you think old man in a robe in like a medieval laboratory. You're like not
hat.
Yeah, you're like not this like girl who's young and spunky, right?
Okay, now here's something I think about sometimes, because I think about all this stuff constantly also, and part of me thinks this is a Western kind of privileged position to be even thinking like this, because we're so far away from survival needs, right? Where I don't know if someone is starving and just trying to stay alive, if they have the luxury to think about the law of attraction and what they're manifesting in their lives. What do you think about that?
I have gone through the same thought processes, right? So on one end, and I don't know if this is exactly speaking to what you're answering, but or you're asking, but on one end I see there is a differentiation in societal views between Western and Eastern. So, right? And so actually a lot of this stuff that we're talking about with these like woo-woo principles, actually the ancientness of this knowledge is that it came from Eastern thought processes. So these are things where like Buddhism, Taoism, even ancient Hindu, like these are things that have been there for a long time. Ayurvedic medicine, which I've actually just been, apparently the universe really wants me to start studying that because
it's everywhere.
No joke. I had a girlfriend, the same one that I told the intention to. She sends me an email one day and asked me if I knew about Ayurvedic medicine. She's like, there's these things called doshas, and they seem very similar to chakras. I wanted to know what you thought about it. And I said, I've heard about it, Ayurvedic medicine, but I need to do more. And then I subscribed to this, this kind of like interesting subscription service that like gives you things like crystals and tea and fun stuff like that I'm into. And it was themed Ayurvedic medicine. I have a book on the beginner's guide of Ayurvedic principles.
It's time.
And it's all full. So I'm like, okay, so now I need to go research that because it probably needs to go into like this greater philosophy.
That's your next thing.
That's my next thing I have to dive deep into. But these are principles, that we're talking about that come from the other side, and I feel like it's just now permeating, in a big way to us, right? Because the way Western, thought processes and societies work are way different than Eastern, basic philosophies of respect and things like that. We are very individual focused in the West, and they are very collective focused in the East.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I think about in terms of that. And then I also think about, the sense of we have this privilege, like this idea of, quote unquote, first world problems. Well,
like if you're in Syria right now in the war, you're having a whole different experience than we're having on my couch in Burbank.
Absolutely. And the thing I say to that is, although that is very unfortunate, and we brought up Syria, you and I both have a mutual background that we are both, our heritage is part Syrian. I have thought about that. Like there are people who are dying in certain countries, there are war-ridden countries, and yes, that is bad.
I mean, you can't say to them, oh, you're manifesting your own reality. Like, that's a bit cruel.
No, but actually, okay, so that is more of a conversation of the problematic nature of, in my opinion, and I don't mean this to like disparage it in any way, law of attraction. I think a lot of people that are familiar with law of attraction either really get it and really love it and want to use it, or think, ooh, there's a lot of things that it doesn't explain, like a war in Syria, sort of thing. And for me, when you look at the hermetic principles, that's where you find the answer for why bad things like that happen, or even why children die of cancer, or why women are attacked in the streets.
Why bad things happen to good people.
Why bad things happen to good people. And it's all in the way I would say that boils down is that it's all a matter of the fact that we are all energy. And because we're energy, it does follow certain principles like the induction of energy. So I would say this, I swear I'm not going to hurt you, I'm in your home right now, but if I wanted to hurt you right now, I could. You know what I mean? You really couldn't, you could only do so much to stop me. You know what I mean? So unless you're in defensive mode, ready for me, which most people aren't thinking that something's going to happen to them, especially here.
Right.
Over there, like where there's wars going on, yes, people are more defensive. There's fake bombs falling from the sky. But it's literally a situation where energy can overpower over other energy. So it's not that someone is necessarily manifesting it. They're not necessarily in the mindset of protecting themselves, right? So like, let's give a very silly, not a silly example, but a very serious example of, maybe someone who's getting attacked on the street, you get mugged, let's say on the street, and maybe someone like stabs you, takes your wallet, right? Things that happen every day.
Yeah.
The person who it is happening to, the victim in that situation, although I hate to like even use those sorts of terminologies because words have so much power, but the person who's on the receiving end of that negative energy probably was not paying attention, was perhaps in the wrong place at the wrong time sort of thing, not really aware of their surroundings. Someone who is more aware of their surroundings will be able to see, okay, there's someone who's coming from over here. And, women are trained, walk with your keys between your hands to help you defend yourself, right? If you're someone who is already embodying an energy of protecting yourself, it is harder for people to prey on you, right? There are reasons why children are preyed upon in the world. It's because it's easy to target a child.
Yeah.
They don't have the energetic ways of protecting themselves because their minds aren't formed fully yet. And they haven't learned these things. That's the other thing. I'm like, the more people hear about these sorts of ideas, I know it can be controversial sometimes, but to me, that problematic things that, the law of attraction sort of brings up, that sometimes the answer we don't like, the idea that like we're manifesting it, I think when you look to the principles, the hermetic principles, and understand that these are principles of energy, that's not necessarily someone's asking for something bad to happen to them, but they're also not, we'll say, protecting their energy in a way or putting up defenses to prevent it from happening, right?
Maybe it's part of the journey that's going to get them to the place
And
they need to get.
absolutely. Because this moment, whatever moment you're in right now, is exactly the most perfect place for you to be. No matter if it seems good or bad, there is no such thing as good or bad. It's all the way you think about it, because the world and mentalism, it's all in your head anyway.
It's just the right now.
It's just the right now.
Do you see how, I want to say the world or our society is kind of evolving in this direction? Because I was talking like this 30 years ago and learned very quickly I had to shut up.
Yeah.
And not speak of these things.
Well, what's really funny? I think we see these, I see that they use this slogan now, the future is female. I don't think that means that one day everyone's going to turn into a woman.
Right.
I think that it means that energy of, to me, I see that and I think, the energy of receiving is coming into the world more, right?
It's the rise of the divine feminine.
Absolutely. The rise of the divine feminine. It doesn't mean that we're going to be putting down the divine masculine.
Right.
It is that we are now hopefully stepping into our power in a new way. And I do think that with the rise of social media, I think that helps with the dissemination of information. Yes, there's a lot of misinformation out there.
There's a lot of nonsense.
There's a lot of nonsense out there, but there's also a lot of podcasters who have alchemists on to spread the good news of these principles and the way that you can be using, your energy and using, your time to manifest what it is that you want.
How are you seeing the state of women right now, especially last year?
Well, I would say that that's a really good example of the way that energy does move. The idea that it can spread, right? So in a way, the reason it maybe has become a movement is because things like social media and people are actually feeling empowered, right? An empowered woman empowers other women, right? So that's not just women, it's men as well. Empowerment, creates empowerment. So we've got a group of individuals who are now kind of the induction of energy. They are vibrating on the same frequency on this issue.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully what will happen is the way any significant change happens is that energy has to become big enough to completely overtake the alternative, right? The status quo. Absolutely. So that is really how change, I think, really is affected. And so I'm hoping that, the movement does grow and that people are doing that. But I feel like I'm doing my part in terms of spreading this message, empowering women to empower themselves and protect themselves energetically and their time and go for what it is that's making them happy so they can actually even be in the state to be vibrating high enough to accept change like that and affect those around them that are not women, right? That are, men who are maybe also, in this conversation with us, because it's not just going to be the women that are going to have to change, themselves. It's also the men, that have to do it as well. And it's, again, expectations. For a very long time, the expectation was something bad happened to you and you're not going to say anything about it.
Right.
Expectations are obviously changing now.
They're going to change. How about we don't have the bad thing happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is next for you in your journey?
Well, we're filming this documentary. I'm working on, organizing this information into a book. And really just spending more time talking to people and putting this idea out there so that, more people hear about it, especially women. I really feel like now is the time to hear this message.
Like, it's funny because you come in with it's about productivity. that is a tip of the iceberg of what you're doing.
Absolutely. But that was what ended up happening, right? It was productivity that led me to talk to women, right? And find out that what their issues were that they weren't being productive or didn't feel productive because they were putting their energy they were using in the wrong places. And then I was led to find that, this is actually the nature of energy in the female sense. And maybe I need to tell them that so that they can fix what they're doing so that they actually become productive. So it is productivity.
What do you think your big mission is? I'll tell you what I think your mission is.
Okay.
I think it's clearing the space so that women can fully own their power.
That's very well. I would say that I really would like to see women truly put themselves first, and what that would look like in the world if women did. How much, especially if you think about it, stereotypically, because women are the ones that are like, the nurturing and things like that. That's why we kowtow to societal expectations.
Get walked on.
That's why these things happen. So if a woman actually put herself first and then was able to fill her cup so that she had more to share with others, because the nature of femininity is that nurturing caringness and the service to others, how much more good would be done in the world because of that.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
What have we not talked about that you wanted to say?
Well, I definitely would love to have anyone that this, resonates with can absolutely follow along with me in this journey of, becoming this thought leader and putting this message out into the world. I would definitely suggest following me on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/MissTrenchcoat, and definitely follow along.
Miss Trenchcoat?
Miss Trenchcoat, I know.
What's that?
It was a very old, gamer tag that I used that never went away and stuck. And everyone, including family members, and family members of other people that I'm just friends with, call me Miss Trenchcoat.
Oh, that's funny. So that's your YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's my YouTube channel. And my everything. All my social media, everything I have is Miss Trenchcoat.
What does that mean?
Miss, I'm a girl, a woman, and Trenchcoat, it was literally part of this. It didn't necessarily mean anything. It was just this tag that was kind of created, like a shortened version of a tag.
Oh, so it just stuck?
It just stuck.
Oh, okay, funny.
Remember back into 2008, 2009, when people started social media sorts of accounts, they didn't use their name.
Right.
They used a tag. That's how long I've been around. This is a serious OG, okay? But if you want to follow along with the documentary, it's not at Miss Trenchcoat specifically. It's productivityalchemist.com. So www.productivityalchemist.com.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, so the documentary that Alexia is doing, is that going to be put out kind of as you go, or is it going to be one film at the end?
It's going to be one film at the end.
Okay.
So we're filming now, hopefully it'll be, completed in October. Then Alexia has a schedule of film festivals that we are hopefully going to be attending. And then we'll be premiering hopefully in 2019.
Okay, so you're going to be on the circuit.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, your business is, you have digital
digital products, so digital classes, lectures, and digital downloads that you could, create your own planner with and use to actually help you get organized. That's over at thecharmedshop.com.
And can people work with you one-on-one coaching?
There are some of my courses that involve one-on-one coaching.
And you're also now starting to do corporate talks and corporate workshops.
Yes, so that's something that I'm definitely open to receiving those offers. Feel free to email me.
Okay, have we said all the ways where people can reach you?
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Yes.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, a Herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Alexis Giostra for sharing her story. And special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Alice McQuaid for the music. Please find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or Podbay, and subscribe and leave a review. And of course on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features, bios of our guests, and the cups and t-shirts. Please go there right now and subscribe. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter at Other50% and Instagram at Other50% Podcast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Hi, I'm Emily Van Dyne.
I'm Sean Patrick Hughes.
I'm an assistant professor of writing at Stockton University in New Jersey, where I also teach women and gender studies.
I'm a veteran, a writer, blogging about politics and society, and now I'm jumping into podcasts. This is Exit 38, where Me Too meets iServe.
Sean and I come from the same place originally. We're both from Ventnor City, New Jersey.
We're off Exit 38.
And our lives took sort of very divergent paths.
and I live in California. We haven't been in the same room probably in close to 30 years.
I read the blog and it was great. And I was so impressed. I thought like, oh, he's a really good writer and it's very reasonable. And it's one thing to be conservative, like go for it, be conservative. But it's another thing to be a bigot. And he was clearly somebody who was genuinely conservative, but also not a bigot. And I was very impressed. So I sent him a message, just like 3 lines on Facebook. Hi, I read your blog. I thought it was great. Like, congratulations and keep it up. So he just started talking to me. And I was like, why is he talking to me? I think that's the question. I still wonder, like, why is he interested in what I have to say?
I hope this show is the show that I've been looking for, that I myself would like to listen to. When I consume content, it's generally because I want to learn something new or interesting. I'm not trying to confirm my own beliefs, or I'm not trying to find somebody to fight with or argue with. I'm really interested in hearing different perspectives. And I think what we can do with this podcast is have 2 people who come from 2 very different places, but are both informed and knowledgeable on a wide variety of subjects that we can both learn from. And as a result, the audience can learn along with us.
I think this show is about America. I think this show is about the possibility that we can have dialogue and we can come to an understanding of other people's situations and how it relates to ours. And we can have empathy.
When we talk about topics, I regularly learn something that I had no idea existed from her.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, Emily. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
I think it's fun that we can now pretend like we didn't just have 30 minutes of banter to work up to this awkward introduction. So this is how this is going to go.
Could you tell more stories where you talk about you being at Emerson and your friend being at Harvard? Can you tell more stories like that?
Oh, I don't know, Sean. Why don't you tell more stories about how you went to the Naval Academy on appointment and you used to organize the SEAL teams globally? And then if I say something, you're going to say, you know, she actually has a good point.
Surprisingly, you're informed. I can say stuff like that. No, you don't understand. She just blasts me regularly.
He's so nice, and she's just always cutting on him, you know? Like,
well, that's entirely my ploy. That's how I win, right? You're the hysterical, horrible feminist, and I'm the logical, you know. But I am very much coming from a different perspective than Emily does. And so we're here because I think that so much of the dialogue that we've had over the last few years since we connected has been an honest and good dialogue about the differences in perspectives that we have. And, you know, so much of how we view America is based on the view from the seats we're sitting in, because you have to be a little bit vulnerable and you have to say things like maybe the things that I've done in my life have some level of privilege involved. And that's not easy for everybody.
Like, I think that's part of what we're trying to do on the show. Like, I think you and I consistently find a middle ground.
See you at Exit 38.
Exit 38.
Where Me Too meets I Serve.
Where we really try to listen.
Exit 38.
A new podcast coming soon.